You are the one you've been waiting for. Yes, you are the one that you've been waiting for. Yes, you are, it is true. You and I are the ones we've been hoping would come to save us from ourselves. So tonight I want to share with you a little about alchemy of the body, mind, heart, soul, and the will too. We don't usually bring that into the picture, but I do believe that if we do not strengthen up our will, then we do not have anything to ground the lightning strike of awareness, the God spark that comes down to strike and manifest man, woman, will of man. The woman is and can take us to a new place. It is true, I'm gonna do what I need to, which is to drink some water as I come back into the moment without song. I hope you're doing well tonight, and I just wanted to come on, even though Katia wasn't able to join me this evening, but I wanted to come on anyway. We're going to do what we were going to do tonight next week instead, and tonight, what I wanted to share with you is about alchemy of the self. And by self, I spell it CELL-F. Because if we actually look at that F as being fear or faith, that is what we will see we fill ourselves with. And so, what we can do if we understand how to actually alchemize the ingredients of our life. This is what is so significant with what's going on here in my homeland of Canada, at least, with the convoy and the mandates and all of the protesting and the force against something. What we resist persists. And so it actually comes back to a spiritual level, because if we have the ingredients in the kitchen of our alchemy, of our ability to alchemize that which is outside by starting within our own cells, if it's inside of us, it will show up out there. And if we don't address it in here, it's going to eventually show up out there. Abraham Hicks, I remember years ago, had the apple pie and Tabasco sauce analogy, where it was basically that she was going to bake a pie, right? Or not her specifically, but just imagine you're wanting to bake a pie. And so you're getting all of your ingredients together, you open the fridge and you get everything you want. And then you notice the Tabasco sauce and you're like, oh, Tabasco sauce, that would ruin my apple pie. I definitely don't want that Tabasco sauce in there. So you take a note of what you don't want, and then you carry on the preparations. And then you go and you're making your apple pie and you grab other ingredients, and then you go into the fridge. And then for whatever reason, you grab that Tabasco sauce and you put it on the counter. Then you say, oh my God, that Tabasco sauce would ruin my apple pie. I definitely don't want that Tabasco sauce in my apple pie. And so then you just try to just say, okay, well, don't touch it and keep going. And then you're making your apple pie, and then somehow you grab this apple pie or you grab the Tabasco sauce and you bring it over closer towards the apple pie. And you're just thinking, I really do not want that Tabasco sauce to get near this apple pie, because that Tabasco sauce would really mess up this creation of mine. And then all of a sudden your hands just unconsciously taking off the lid of the Tabasco sauce and dumping it into the apple pie, and you wonder why. Well, the universe doesn't differentiate negatives. It only gives us more of what we're focused on. So if we're focused on what we don't want, The focus is on that. So the universe gives us that which we do not want, it not hearing the not, and just giving us more of what we are focused on. So weight is another good example with that. And it's like the emphasis is on losing weight, losing weight, losing weight. Well, if the universe doesn't differentiate negatives and loss is a negative, then when you're focused on weight, are you focused on the loss or are you focused on the weight? Because you're actually focused on the weight. The loss of the weight ultimately is just the thing that we think will make us more content, more happy. And so this is where we really have to start better understanding our emotions. And also to understand there is a difference between emotions, which are energies in motion that need to move within the energetic system of us, and states of being, which is in the emotional high rise of awareness theory, which takes the emotional guidance scale or spectrum of Abraham Esther Hicks's work. And then it has a downward spiral and an upward spiral. So I did in reverse for whatever reason. But you've got these two spirals, and boredom is at the top of the downward spiral, which is why they say idle hands are the devil's workshop. And then contentment is the bottom of the upward spiral. So if you can get yourself into a place of contentment, you're in a state of being because you're being present, present into this now moment. The newly ordered world that we're creating is now. There is no time other than now. That's why in the court system, the only thing they can do is loop us or rope us into a not now moment, which is fictional, which is where they have jurisdiction to be able to call the shots on our lives because we submitted, we dropped the knee, so to speak, which I was thinking about earlier, how we dropped the, or a man traditionally has dropped the knee to propose to the woman he wants to marry, or however it goes. Obviously, we've got lots of options for how that dynamic might look nowadays. But I was thinking about how that works, and it does, in my mind, connect to the difference between standings and statuses. Because a man can stand until then he drops the knee, and then he has to consider another in the decision making around his own life, because ultimately he has now taken on a wife. And happy wife, happy life, I do believe that's connected to a very toxic model, because it's not one partner that needs to be happy, it's both. And it's not even happy, and it's not all the time, but you can definitely have joyful states of being. And you can also experience the lower emotions with your partner. But it just struck me that the happy wife, happy life is very toxic. And ultimately, the standing is dropped because then your relationship status changes and you go from single to married, or whatever your change is. That's just a status that changes your identity, because it all comes back to identity and who we see ourselves to be, right? I love the fact that today is the day before 2 February 22 2022. So tomorrow is said to be a really big energy day. And I'm jumping straight off of one thing into that because I want to be honest in the fact that I didn't feel like actually doing this. I've been feeling tired and whatever else because of what's coming tomorrow. But I wanted to come on tonight anyway because I committed to doing it. And also because I think it's important to talk about the fact that there are huge energetic shifts that are taking place right now collectively. And if we are not mindful, full of mind, considerate of all of what's going on and understand how to actually discern what is ours in this situation. It'll be like the Tabasco sauce in the apple pie that I shared at the beginning of this, where you're baking this pie and you don't want to include that Tabasco sauce, but ultimately the Tabasco sauce is kind of like the energies of the collective right now that are overwhelming everybody's feeds and then ultimately feeding off of us because we have no comprehension of the energetic impact of the ethers and what it means when our image is captured in the screen and we are dropped from 3D to 2D, which is really what we have to consider is what we're being faced with right now with these choices, because 2D is lack of choice. Option A, option B. So, yes, you could say they're a choice because you have two, but ultimately, you are very limited in 2D. It's the box. You're either in the box, you're out of the box, but the box is what governs things. And so that does relate to relationships in some ways because you do get more limited when you do have parameters set and boundaries set. But that's not a bad thing. It's actually very liberating, or can be, if you're with the right partner. And so I'm not sure why that's coming into this experience unless you may be tweaked or something might be hitting for you. So I share it anyway because it's on my heart and mind to just go with that. But I just want to say very candidly that if we're going to be alchemists, we need to understand that the collective energies are going to try to impact us. And I was talking about the 2D experience of being in the virtual reality, and that being what happens when our will is no longer ours. And that's connected to the government, if you think about it, because the government is imposing the corporate will onto the people, which require the people to surrender our free will in order to comply, which is what it means to be an individual within a group. And it's very dangerous to actually be a member of a group from a consequences perspective that we're not often thinking about. And I oftentimes talk about the organized pseudo legal commercial argument litigant, OPCA litigant status that could be applied to a man or woman that advocates for themselves in a way that is vexatious or annoying to a legal system that is completely corrupt. And everyone that works for it is ultimately sworn first and foremost to the crown, which is also connected to the Vatican's and the whole corporatocratic model. But there's a tremendous amount going on right now. And we just really need to be mindful of the fact that if you break down, as I do with words, if you break down individual, it came to me in the last week that individually is in, divide, you, ally. And then individual, in, divide, you, all. And when you think about it from that perspective, which is a very alternative way to see a word that you would say, well, that E was not there before you added it for the energy that I am using to play with that word. So indeed, but consider this, in divide, we are divided within, you, ally. So you're the ally for the division because by surrendering your free will to be part of groupthink or to be part of a group that requires you do their will, then this is interesting because earlier today when I went for a walk, I was singing Not My Will, But Thine Be Done, just to try to move myself out of the way so that I can allow what needs to come to do so. And I was using that song. And then after having sang that song, which is not an actual song you can look up, other than I did post a little minute, a little short, if you wanted to check that out earlier over on YouTube, if you're watching this on Facebook. And thank you to everyone joining in as well today. But yeah, not thy will, not my will, but thine be done is very much what we've been taught is the best way to surrender to the divine and let it flow. But as I said earlier, when lightning strikes it, if it has nothing to ground into, where does it go? We have to understand that the will is what grounds awareness. And it has to then merge in the heart. And then that's how we manifest through the body, through our hands, through our hearts, through our minds, and all of it. It ultimately has to be the merging in the heart of awareness and will, like the lightning strike. But individually, in divide, you ally. You're the ally to the group at the expense of your own free will. So surrendering your free will for the sake of the will of the group means that you no longer have the same ability to express as what you did when you were unlimited, because you were adhering to our common law rights, which is the unwritten rights. And common law, when it's not capitalized in any way, means that it's all lowercase and there's no hyphen, because that's another way that they have taken common law, which is the unwritten and unlimited law that we have unlimited rights from, other than not to harm our fellow man or woman, and hopefully, or others' property, creating harm, loss, fraud, or keeping the peace, or the tenets of the common law. But it's the common law all lowercase, because otherwise it goes into the capitis diminutius. And then you either have maxima, which is all caps, which is when all heads have been severed in the eyes of the law. But that just means in the actual letter I, the head has been taken off when it was capitalized and then boxed in, as I often say. You do have also capitis diminuitis, media, which is a middle, capitalizing on the man or woman. And then you also have minima, which is a minimally capitalizing, which is kind of like when you get married and your status changes, but none of your rights or privileges change. In the media, you've got some of your freedoms are changed. And then when you're maximally capitalized, that's when all of your rights are capitalized on. We made it up north. Love you and all the people. Amazing, Chad. Very glad to hear that you made it out of your comfort zone of home, and I'll look after your critters tomorrow for you as promised. But anyway, the capitalizing of our names, of us, and our statuses, all of these really fit into a much bigger game, which would be bound to a two-dimensional experience of yes or no, choose, check the box or no, right? And so when you look at life in a box, you're very limited compared to when you're outside of the box or when you drop the walls on the box, which is ultimately what I try to do with words when I kind of break them down. Like person, for instance. Last week after editing the video that Katia and I did, or the interview or podcast we did for the last episode, I finally had the notion to break down person and thinking, well, what does person mean? And it's like, well, obviously, per son. Per being of each, and then son, the root of it I actually found is sound. And so it makes sense in this universe, the one song that we're all singing, for the one sun to ultimately be the one who is here to shine bright like a diamond. I'm thinking of a Rihanna song. Nah, that's amazing. Um, so just wanted to share about person and then individually. And there was another that I had broke down. But ultimately, when we start looking at things differently, then things start looking differently. And there's a common saying where they say that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So it's like the Tabasco sauce in the beginning. It's like if you don't want that Tabasco sauce to get in your apple pie, leave the Tabasco sauce in the fridge. Or better yet, if you can't resist, just get it out of your house altogether, which is really what we need to do with all of these collective energies that are impressing themselves onto us and making us feel like we are bound to all of the drama and the trauma that is going on right now. And absolutely prayers and best wishes to everything that is going on in Canada here with all of the protesters in Ottawa. You do have to recognize that the government is an entity that feeds off of the ones that pay it to work for it, to sign on behalf of it, to assume the liability and the karma for making the orders that ultimately they're liable for personally. And who knows when the system will fall and things will change, and the Nuremberg trials 2.0, which are already said to be happening, are going to move forward in a way that makes it to a mainstream media, which is not likely until we actually take back those uh, airwaves too. um, I don't really want to keep this on too long. I was going to share the emotional high rise of awareness, and as mentioned, I I needed to have a nap before, and so I did not. And the only thing that I've got easy access to is the hierarchy of creation that you've seen before. So we're not going to show that now. And I'm simply going to say that I appreciate you for showing up tonight. I hope that you recognize that alchemy is about moving the emotions that are within, because if you don't move the emotions within, they'll start to express themselves. And the other thing about the Tabasco sauce analogy is to say that whatever it is that you don't want to include in your cooking experience, recognize what it teaches you you do want instead. So if you've got the Tabasco sauce and you say that would be really horrible in this apple pie, you could ask the question, what would make my pie even better? And then you could focus your energies onto that instead of, oh, I don't want that Tabasco sauce. Well, who cares about the Tabasco sauce? It's like when you walk into a grocery store. My friend Neil Sperling, he says it's the shopping cart method. It's like, do you do that with life? It's just like you go through, you pick out what you want from the grocery store, which is ultimately what life is. And then you go and you check out the things that you want and you leave the things that you don't want. So if we can really get to that place and also not deny the emotions that are showing up, because denial, there's an acronym for that. Didn't even know, K is silent. I am lying. Didn't even know I'm lying. Denial. Some people truly are in denial about the truth. And then there are others that may just be feigning denial or however it goes. But if we deny anything, we suppress, compress, repress, depress, we're not able to move. And the will requires movement. So movement is essential of the body, of the heart, of the mind, of the spirit, and of the will. We have to exercise that ability to move in order to give ourselves room to actually do what we came here for. So I hope that you will choose to take whatever Tabasco sauce emotions out of their state of compression and instead be willing to feel them. Be willing to actually heal them by reintegrating them and giving them love like what you never did before. And that's how you really shift into the faith instead of the fear, which the fear is false emotion appearing real. So all of those lower emotions, they're not necessarily real. They just feel very real because you're getting hit as well with all of the emotions from the past in the moment one of those arise. Yeah. So if you can feel them and recognize where you want to deny something or where you want to suppress it or where you think other people won't be able to handle you. And so you got to just tone it down for their sake, which I've been told my whole life. And somehow I stopped caring so much to do that a lot of the time. And sometimes I still do. And the screen freezes a little in that moment. So I do still have the fear and the terror and the rage and all of those emotions that I've never owned, that I don't even have awareness of just yet, maybe. And there's a series. I'm on the 7th of 8 now, and it's been quite the investment of energy. But this is the Right Use of Will series that I highly recommend. This one is about healing the chakras and imprinting. And imprinting is essentially the original cause. So at the very beginning, when we didn't know who we were as spirits, and we came into form, and suddenly we had feelings that we'd never had before, and we didn't know what to do with them. When we came into that experience, then we denied things because we didn't know, and we didn't know how this book talks about the 4 components, which is will, which is mother, father, which is God awareness. You've got father of manifestation, which is body, and then you have heart. And so those 4 characters or elements are meant to really work together. And yet, because they didn't quite know how the other would respond to their emotions or what was coming up for them, then they suppressed things, and they did it even before they remembered that they had suppressed it. So we really do need to remember those parts of ourselves again and reintegrate them into wholeness, because integrity is all about coming into wholeness within our own selves. And when we can do that, that's when we can offer the greatest transformation to the collective. Forgive yourself and others. Let the past go. Don't dwell. Doesn't matter what others think. Yes, absolutely. What other people think of us is none of our business, because oftentimes it's not about us in the first place anyway. If you actually read a book by Don Miguel Ruiz called The 4 Agreements, it's a Toltec wisdom guide. And the 4 agreements are: be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. Because if you've done your best, you'll know you did enough. If you didn't do your best, that's where you leave yourself open to the potential to have regrets. And ultimately, the box of regrets at the end of our lives, or even through it, is what keeps us out of the moment where all of our power exists. I just wanted to check over on Facebook and see if there were any comments. I'm so heavily shadow banned on everything. It's really frustrating. And you'd think, what harm is she doing? Like, what's wrong with what I'm doing? But truth is dangerous, because it's like that story of Truth and Lies when they went and bathed in a fountain in town and took their clothes off, and then they were in the fountain bathing together, and then all of a sudden Lies snuck out and stole Truth's clothes, and then when Truth realized that she was left naked and without her clothes, then she shamefully had to walk through town trying to maintain her dignity and cover her modesty to the best of her ability. And ultimately, everyone was offended by the truth because lies had taken truth's clothes. The number 4 is important to know the mechanisms of the unconscious. Very interesting, Bulls. Would love to hear more of your perspective on that. The number 4 has been definitely showing up quite a lot, and we get the click in that moment. The Four Agreements is a great book. Yes, absolutely. Be impeccable with your word. If you say you'll do something, do it. If you don't want to have Tabasco sauce in your pie, then stop talking about the Tabasco sauce and realize what having that Tabasco sauce in your awareness while making that apple pie helps you see would make your pie better instead of focusing on what you don't want, right? Don't make assumptions and don't take anything personally was why I mentioned it in the first place, because it never is about us. Everybody's so wrapped up in their own world. I believe I want to say it was Eleanor Roosevelt who had said that you wouldn't care so much what other people thought of you if you realized how seldom they do. And that's not because you're not significant. It's just because everyone is so self-consumed that oftentimes they don't have capacity to give others that level of consideration that we're so fixated on to say, oh, are they paying attention to my imperfection that's so big for me and yet unnoticeable to them because they're focused on their own imperfection and hoping you won't notice it. So don't take anything personally. And on that note, I'm going to step out tonight and simply say thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope that this was useful it's just a surface of the waves approach to alchemy and the self from an alternative perspective with filling your cells with faith instead of fear. And we're going to get into the high rise of emotional awareness soon. Because I want to, before I break it down publicly next, I want to bring in David Hawkins' scale of consciousness and then put that on and see how that relates, which I've had the thought to do for a long time and hadn't quite knew how to do it just yet. And now I'm starting to feel like it's time because it's divine timing, everything in its right time. And if we try to force things, you might wind up in a mental institution. I say that with a laugh because that's kind of part of my own story when I was trying to make things happen. And I wouldn't recommend it. But I learned everything I needed to by doing it at that time compared to having not had that experience and then going into the pandemic, the plandemic, whatever you want to call what's going on now. And so I wouldn't have stood the way that I have had I not been through what I did go through because I was trying to make something happen. But what I also learned, in addition to where I will not consent to going, and consent, if you break down that word, the thought that comes to mind for me, and maybe you have an alternative to it, is consciousness. And then it's sent to you because you're the one that then is receiving it. So all of what's going on right now, all of the collective consciousness, which has a lot of fear because everything is coming to the surface. It has to. That's all being sent. So are you going to consent to that or not? And my experience helped me know I will never consent to being under the jurisdiction of psychopaths or sociopaths again, willingly. I didn't know specifically that was what I was surrendering myself to. But when you surrender something, you shouldn't get it right back, right? When you surrender your driver's license, for instance, it's like, well, if you're surrendering that, then like you keep that. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know enough about the whole surrender thing. I know that Christian Dan the Christian man, he breaks down a lot of words and terms, and he talked about surrender in a video that I'd watched of his. But yeah, there's our plan and there's the divine plan, and the difference is in timing. The divine timing and our timing is generally not the same. So, narcissists are psychopaths and sociopaths, and ones that are so full of light in reversal, which is what denial is. It's unloving light that has come down, and it's penetrating the will or piercing the will, compared to loving light, which is able to actually fuel. And there's a very different experience, like with lovemaking, when you're, when you're receiving loving light compared to unloving light. It's very different. And when you're in a relationship with a narcissist or a psychopath or sociopath or anyone that is in denials emotionally, there will be projections and the gaslighting and all of the craziness that culturally, which is the cult you rally with BS, that we have agreed to because it's not broken, so don't fix it, but there's a lot that is broken. License means to ask permission. Well, is that literally? I hadn't looked at that one, Chad. You'll have to break that one down. But yeah, if you have a license, it means that you surrendered your standing, or you dropped your standing into a status in order to allow an outside force to create the parameters by which you have to move. So that I would agree, and I am curious for more information. But yeah, so wanted to come to you and simply say, I hope you have a great day tomorrow. When it's all kinds of Tuesday, 2 is what you'll get tomorrow. And so I hope you enjoy it, and also know lots may come up emotionally for you. And if it does, well, then please just be willing to feel it all. And even if you need to express and it's not pretty, don't worry if you can maybe get yourself into a space where you can express without harming anything or anyone else. That would be great for you and all of us too, because when you do get it out of you, then it's not in the kitchen of your heart to be part of the desires you manifest. And we all see it's true that we are all connected, and I hope you have a great day, and I wish you a wonderful day, that you may need to be gentle with yourself, like I felt I needed to be tonight before I came on here live. And so I'll say, just be graceful with yourself and do what you need to, and move the emotions, and judge not yourselves, because they have held on to all of the emotions you did not know how to move before, but now you're learning to, and we'll get deeper into that. But for now, I will just say thank you for tuning, and I hope you have a great night. Have a good one. Laura J, namaste, go. For today, that is all I got to say.